Dr. Joanna Burch-Brown, thank you very much for joining us on Trade Finance Talks TV.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to be here.
So, just to get started, where are we at right now when it comes to green finance?
So I think we're in a moment where huge positive change is possible. We have tools that we've never had before. We have a much higher level of awareness and motivation, and this is the moment to seize. This is the moment when we can really make a huge difference on the biggest challenge that's facing us as a planet.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the EU Taxonomy and what does it let us do at the moment?
Okay, so the EU Taxonomy is a tool that has been developed. It's kind of phenomenal. It's amazing what people have done with it. Yeah. Basically, if you go online, you can see there's an EU Taxonomy compass. What it lets you do is to look at any kind of investment and see, kind of measure out whether we should consider it to be green or not green. And we need that kind of tool because we need that in order to be able to coordinate all of our efforts to invest greenly, right? So you can go into that taxonomy. If you yourself have a product, you could go in and say, here's what you can like go and figure out whether it's green, whether it counts as green according to that taxonomy right now or not. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't, then you can work on improving that. And what it guides us to do that I think is quite nice is it doesn't just look at one dimension of the environment. It says, here are 6 ways in which something can be green, or 6 dimensions to look at. Yeah. So it asks about climate mitigation. So is this part of climate mitigation? That mitigation means reducing emissions to prevent climate change. You can say whether it's part of climate adaptation. So if we're not fast enough, it'll help us to adapt to the changes that do take place. You can look at, you have a look at the impact it has on water and marine life. You can have a look at whether it's part of creating an economy where everything that you're using, there's a kind of full life cycle of that object taken care of. Yep. You look at pollution, and finally, the final one is biodiversity. What impact does it have on biodiversity? So what it says is something counts as green if it's having a positive impact on one of these and not having a damaging effect on the others. Okay. So that's the kind of key. I think
that's really interesting because often people might take one view of a definition and actually it could have a negative impact on other areas of what one would consider green finance, right? But this kind of helps that by saying it can't be damaging to those other 5 factors, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's a really important kind of conceptual framework for people to be working with, and it's great that it's there in that tool.
And I'm sure policymakers can take a leaf out of that book to actually create other policies and other definitions. For example, when we create definitions around green trade finance, for example.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah.
Are there any limitations around EU taxonomy?
Yes. So my view is that this is a great starting point, but it would be possible for us to invest in a way that looks green, according to that book, and has a devastating impact on the environment, which isn't where we want to be. So I'm going to explain why is that possible. Basically, as I understand it, the EU taxonomy, what it guides you to look at is a single investment. So you're looking at a single investment on its own. What it doesn't show us is the collective impact. So let's say that you invest in solar panels. But everybody else also thinks, oh, solar panels, that's green on the EU taxonomy. I'll also invest in it. And everybody invests in that. The taxonomy can't capture the fact that all of those solar farms that then get built have impacts collectively on land use that are very high pressure if you have that many things, right? And we've seen that kind of impact in the past with biofuels, where everybody rushed to invest in biofuels thinking this is really, really great, but because it was a huge sort of impact on land use. It caused starvation. It caused like the kind of a lot of habitat loss. And what is kind of interesting is, we talk so much about climate change, but actually the main driver of biodiversity loss so far has been habitat destruction. So what we don't want to do is all rush towards reducing carbon emissions by doing things that end up clearing huge amounts of habitat. To some extent, the EU Taxonomy helps us with that, because it's like there is protection around things like highly biodiverse land, but it doesn't really yet tackle that collective picture where we actually need to look at what's the collective impact, and to be thinking on land use pressure and so on.
Yeah, you've got to think quite holistically, and I think really looking at those 6 points that you mentioned earlier could be a way to alleviate some of those problems. So what's the solution here?
So I would love to see, and maybe this is already there in the works, but I think what we need is everybody to know about it, if it is, a way of measuring that collective level activity and kind of gauging gauging things at the collective level. So as people are using the taxonomy, they're already going to be collecting tons of data and sharing it. There must be a way to collect all of that and then be able to have a look at, in real time to an extent, okay, lots and lots of people are doing this kind of thing that's having a big impact on land use pressure.
Yeah.
We need to not invest in so many of those for a while, and kind of maybe there's a technological solution there that somebody could really make a great impact by working on that.
Absolutely. And I guess just one final question to our banking, finance, and trade community. What would your advice or recommendations be to them when they're looking at ways that we can diversify our way to carbon neutral?
So I think, I guess maybe the biggest takeaway on that in terms of things that you can just straight away do is diversify way more than you think you need to. So I think people often think, okay, I shouldn't put all my eggs in one basket, so I won't do everything with solar power. I'll also do some wind turbines, and I'll do, so maybe there are like 3 baskets I'll put my eggs in. But when you look back at Markowitz and all of the kind of the foundational theory of portfolio theory, what it shows is that you should invest in as many different assets as meet the sort of return risk threshold as you want. And if you diversify, just as widely as you possibly can, you'll end up with much lower risk, for the same return.
Yeah.
So I think just taking diversification as far as you can is going to be a way of trying to help buffer some of these impacts, and looking beyond, becoming familiar with some of the ways in which technologies can impact the environment, and thinking, is it land use? Is it, and some of which are captured in the taxonomy, and some of which I think are not quite there yet.
Well, thank you very much, Joanna. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and what a profound speech at the ITFA annual conference.
It was really fun.
Very fun indeed. Some very strong messages. I think that diversification piece, hugely important, and also considering and reading up about the EU taxonomy. So thanks for joining us on Trade Finance Talks TV.
Thank you so much. Cheers.